Oh, cool. Hi, I'm Riona MacNamara. I'm a staff writer at Google. Been there about 8 years, but last year was my first time at Write the Docs. And actually, what a year it has been. It has actually been the best year of my career, which has been a long one. It's been about 20 years in tech writing. And it has actually been almost one of the best years of my life in terms of what we've done and accomplished and built a team around the area of internal documentation at Google. And it all started here at Write the Docs. So I want to give you a tiny little bit of background where we do it. And one of the things, you probably can't see that very well because it's a really old photo, but it's my company directory photo. It's my first communion, and you can see the dirt road and the Atlantic and stuff. But one of the things I really like about conferences like this and meeting with other technical writers is that we tend to come from a really diverse set of backgrounds. And my own path to tech was not a direct one. So I started off, I studied English because I wanted to write the great Irish novel. This was going to be my ambition. And by graduation, it became very clear that that was not going to happen. So instead, I said, I will go to law school because I'm going to be the people's hero. And by the end of law school, it was clear that that wasn't going to happen either. So I had to kind of change my plans. So instead, I decided I would go to London and join the glamorous work of literary publishing, where I would maybe discover the great Irish novel and maybe nurse it into existence and maybe attend all these parties with Salman Rushdie and everything like that. And it was going to be awesome. But instead what happened was I actually ended up at Virgin Publishing, the book publishing arm of Virgin. And instead of the great Irish novel, I worked on books about Doctor Who, books about erotic fiction, and books about serial killers. So I've forgotten more about these things than you will ever know. So I spent a lot of time doing this, and then I went to other general publishing houses, like I was at Random House for a while, and then I went to Dublin to be managing editor of Attic Press, which was a very small feminist publishing house that had a lot of impact on the women's movement. But none of this was related to tech, except I started freelancing, and it's so strange the paths your life takes that ends up that you're standing on the stage with a sprung dance floor in Portland. And I took it, which is awesome, and I took a 2-week contract long time ago at Microsoft in Dublin, and I was editing content for Encarta World Atlas. And that 2-week contract in this completely unfamiliar environment, I ended up joining Microsoft. I ended up being international editor for Encarta and Encarta World Atlas. And then in '98, I moved to Redmond. So that was the beginning of tech writing career. So altogether, I was in Microsoft about 10 years, and then I was in Amazon for about 18 months, and now I've been at Google for about 8 years. So that's the kind of tech writing background. And I wouldn't be anywhere else. I really love my job. One of the things, I'm actually one of those intolerable morning people. I am intolerable, even before coffee. And I bounce from my bed. I can't wait to get to work. I can't wait to open my laptop. I can't wait to get online. And I love it. But this time last year, this was not the way it was. I've got to say that this time last year, I was feeling really burned out. I've been working a long time. I've been feeling like, am I making a difference? Am I making an impact? And I started reading a lot about happiness at work. And this is a TED Talk that I really recommend. And he talks about the happy secret to better work. And one of the things he talks about is that we've all been kind of brought up to think that work harder and happiness will be your reward. You know, happiness is what you get when you work hard and you do this. But he says, no, that's not the case at all. Actually, what it is that we work better when we're happy. Happiness comes first. And when we're happy, we're more creative, we're more connected, we are more productive. We can actually have, doctors apparently are 31% faster to make a correct diagnosis when they are happy. So imagine for technical writers. And he says there are 3 predictors of happiness in your job. And they are optimism, your perception of stress, and then connection to other people. And Optimism he defines as the certainty that you will make a difference. Your work is having impact and it matters and it makes a difference, and also that it's being recognized and acknowledged. And I think that's important. We all work all the time and we need to have this. But to give you some context about the challenges that we face in Google, and I think it's familiar to anyone who works in internal engineering documentation. It's just we have it at a huge scale. We have 23,000 engineers. We have hardly any technical writers internally. The ones we have are amazing. They do amazing work, but the reality is that most engineers write and maintain their own documentation. And this is in an ecosystem of literally thousands of constantly shifting interdependent systems that people are working on. And another thing that is really important to know about Google culture, it's a great thing about Google culture, but it can make things challenging. Nobody can tell Google engineers what to do. Really and truly. There are also, they can pick their own systems, they can pick their own tools. There's a lot of tools available. Everybody has a lot of different ways of doing things. And everybody has super strong opinions about which one is the best. I've already been told that this is wrong, and I need to fix this slide. This is what you end up with, though, when you're in documentation. It's totally what you end up with. So we have a thing, we had documentation was in Google Sites, it was in Docs, it was in a wiki, it was in HTML pages, and here what you have here, there's no documentation at all. Or there's some documentation, but it's not really reliable, and it may fall apart at any time, and you don't know if that's been sitting on the floor, is it trustworthy? You know, so that's the situation we're in. So I was not feeling optimistic at that time, because what we had learned, we'd tried lots of different approaches to getting this information, and clearly top-down doesn't work. But we had also found that bottom-up doesn't scale. We had worked on this thing where we would work with teams to make their content exemplars, and we hoped everybody else would learn from that. And but what happened is we'd leave, and the documentation would fall apart again, and people wouldn't maintain it so much. The second one is about your perception of stress, and it's actually not about stress itself, because stress itself is not necessarily bad. What's bad about stress is, do you perceive it as a challenge, which is a very positive, energizing thing, or do you perceive it as a threat? And I was like super threatened, because I could feel like there was this challenge. Google has this survey every year, internal survey, that they take incredibly seriously. And they ask hundreds of questions about people's well-being and their issues at work and what makes them happy and what makes them productive. 2 years in a row, the single biggest hit for engineering productivity was the lack of available, easily findable documentation that they needed to do their work internally. So we're awesome at organizing the world's information and making it universally accepted. Well, it's a little harder to do internally. And in addition, and this was personal, I'd recently been promoted, and I was like, yes, now I can kick back and maybe coast a little. But actually, what did happen was my imposter syndrome just came out in full swing, and now the stakes were going to be so much higher, and my public shaming was going to be so much greater because of this. So this is my state. And the third thing that is really important for happiness at work is the idea of connection. You're connected to the people you work with, you're connected to the work that you do, and you have some influence over the directions you take. And again, it's not just Google. I've seen this at other companies. I think that one of the things that is common in our profession is that we're not always, we're doing more and better jobs, but there's sometimes a culture of scarcity around access to engineers, engineering time, and particularly at the high level, around engineering leadership, where we want to be, the direction we want to go. And the result is that you can sometimes feel kind of isolated, that it's hard to make a difference. So that was my frame of mind this time last year, not doing so well in any of these. And then I went to write the docs. And it was fantastic, and it was my first time at this conference, and these are a couple of talks that really jumped out at me, but mostly was the whole kind of getting everybody together. It was connection. But these two talks were really interesting, especially this one about Twitter, because I was frantically IMing my coworkers, like, they have the exact same problems as us. They have the exact same, and they figured out a way. They are putting the docs with the code. You know, it's really good, and we should think about doing that. And then these ideas of minimal viable documentation, and these were really big takeaways for me. Couldn't wait to go home. This is my coworker, Erin, who's in the New York office, and we were both kind of in between projects, so we started kicking this idea around. And the first thing we did was, well, let's talk to as many engineers as we can. Because we were writers, but it seemed to us that the problem was engineers. Engineers had to write, no, they had to write the documents. It was like the problem that we had was all the solutions we designed before were designed for writers, when actually for this internal engineering ecosystem, writers were not the users, mostly. You know, they could handle all of these tools. It was engineers who were the users. And we heard the same thing over and over again. Its confidence in docs was very low. They either don't exist or they're hard to find, and when you do find them, you don't even know if they're reliable or they're wrong. And when we asked, why do you think this is? It was like, well, we don't have time to write docs. Or do I prioritize docs over implementing this new feature? You know, how is that going to ding me at performance time? There was just no culture of docs being truly integrated into the engineering workflow. And when we tried to go deeper for the very root cause of that, it was really that we have almost, I think it's one of the biggest code bases in the world integrated. It's enormous. And 23,000 engineers pretty much working in it. But the problem is, here's our code base, and the model is your code is in this wonderful code base, and your docs are anywhere at all. Your docs can be over here in a site, they can be in a wiki, they can be in a post-it note on your table. And what we realized was that documentation will never be part of engineering culture until it is fully integrated, not only into the code base, but also into the engineering workflow. But we also had this idea that, okay, so what if we figured out a way to do this? What we really, really did not want was to create another competing content management system that would just add to the fragmentation of documentation. So right from the very beginning, when it was just Erin and me, like in the week or so after Write the Docs, we're saying, we're going to go all out, because we have nothing to lose. We can just start small. And we want to design a system that can become the standard for all of these 23,000 engineers working in the code base. We were going to go big or go home. And we were inspired by this Onion story. 5 Blades was actually our code name. And we said we were going to go full-on 5 Blades on this problem. So what does 5 Blades look like? We were going to enable all engineers to create and maintain and find their documentation using their existing tool set, and do it in a simple format like Markdown, which is portable, and we would render it at a nice predictable URL. So you could read it in source or you could read it in a URL. But we had one problem, which is that our server could not actually read or render content out of the code base, which was a problem. And then we thought, again, we've nothing to lose, so why don't we just ask? So we sent a mail to Steve, who is the awesome engineer who runs this over in Munich, and we asked him, hey, you can't do this, can you do it? Why not? And I love the time difference. I'm on the West Coast, Steve is in Munich, came into work the next day. Steve had written a design doc, he had set up a security review. The system was basically, he said, yes, this is how we can do it. And then over the next 9 days, we found someone to migrate their documentation. We did a proof of concept. This is obviously, it's internal documentation, so this is obviously placeholder. But you can see that this is a very simple rendering of Markdown. It's not ideal. You can see that we're having to link to a style sheet and stuff like this. But it was a proof of concept. We could render content out of the code base. And so G3Doc, that's the name of our project, was born. And the idea, we're all about branding. This is our branding. It's just the terminal. It's nothing you don't need. Radically simple. It's you just drop in Markdown and it just works. So on July 8th, we launched our first full-on website, which is for a major internal infrastructure project that is not called Wolf Hall. And you can see that it looks so much better. You can see that we have some navigation in there. There's page info that is read directly from the code base. There's some navigation. We get some nice code formatting, all of that kind of stuff. And this is hipster, Lorem hipster or something. Yeah, which I found out about at Write the Docs last year. And you can see that the source for this is actually really simple. It's just, you got your lists, you got your sample code, you got a dynamic TOC, and all the navigation. It's just a bulleted list in Markdown. If the server finds a file called sitemap.md, it'll render your navigation like that. So you get it all for free. It's really easy to do. And the reaction was really great. The reaction was incredibly positive from engineers, like, this is the best thing ever. This is my favorite quote, because I had never heard an engineer say this in real life. I had never heard an engineer say it. So what happened then was, it was mostly engineers. Over the next couple of weeks, we ended up having about 18 projects migrated, and the really cool thing was we only talked to about 3 of them. Most of it spread virally from engineer to engineer, and that was the way we thought it had to go, because nobody tells them what to do, and it had to come from other engineers. But there were also some tech writers who were really facing a lot of problems at scale. So that's Ed, who works on search infrastructure, and Ricardo and ads, and Theodore, who's actually here today, and who had this monumental task. Here's a team of 300 developers with scores of projects, manage their documentation, write harder, write faster, and obviously that was not going to work. But what was really cool about this was these writers saw this had potential. It didn't fit all their needs, so in a very open source way, governance belongs to the contributors. They actually just joined the team, and they started building the platform and building it out. What was also really important and really key to success was, even though everybody at the stage here, except for Steve, is a writer, never lost the focus that we are actually dealing with engineers. And that was our mantra. We are focused on the user relentlessly. To do this. Oh, I click it there. So we talked a lot about the teams. We wanted everybody to be happy. And we wanted everybody to be productive. So we actually did, at this stage, think a lot about the type of team we wanted to have. And it was very... Oh. Sorry about that. We talked a lot about this, and we really wanted to be a place where we moved fast. So we had a policy of no cookie licking. Do you know what cookie licking is? It's like when there's a feature you think is really cool and you would like to do it, but you don't have the time, so you lick the cookie and you put it there so no one else can take it. And we're saying, that is not going to happen. We are focused on momentum and growth, and no cookie licking. We want everybody to have an opportunity for impact, and governance belongs to the contributors. The next stage that we had to do after that, though, we saw adoption growing and people loved it, but it was like, how do we get this really into engineering culture? And the other thing that was really key for our growth was that we integrated into the core developer toolset at Google. We started forming partnerships with the developer infrastructure team, and so the 3 main tools that engineers use to find and edit and preview and do code reviews, all of those were integrated with our documentation platform and with the servers. So you could instantly view a rendered file, you could do all of this. And this was really key, and one of the things that we found was the integrations did not have to be big. Even just one tiny little preview this file made a huge difference in usability. So that was our tool chain. So adoption. September we had 18 projects. December we had almost 160. And again, most of these were completely viral, and we were feeling awesome about this, so we set some really aggressive goals for Q1. We said we wanted 300 projects up and running in Q1. While this was happening, We also found that our roles were changing, and we talked a little bit about connection and scarcity. All of a sudden, engineers and engineering managers and some kind of quite high-level engineers, they started reaching out to us. They're saying, this is good, how can we help? Would you like some money? Do you need some swag? Can we, what can we do? Can I lend my voice to this? Can I support it? And this was almost the most awesome thing, because we had a seat at the table, and we were really able to come to some of these meetings as peers with these engineers in a way that we hadn't really had before. And it was really exciting time to be there. So this is our adoption. You can see back here, I think it has that's one team, one contributor. This morning, the very first thing I do when I wake up is I check adoption, and we are at about 1,600 projects right now. Our aggressive OKR for Q1 was to have 300 projects. We had 930. And all of this was spreading virally from engineer to engineer. People were seeing it, they were talking to each other about it, and that's how it happened. And that also meant we had to really look at our team. We were no longer this kind of guerrilla team that was operating under the radar, kind of scrappy startup. We're now on the way to becoming a core part of infrastructure. So we had to kind of change our goals, always keeping the big 5 blades goal in mind, but the objectives, we now had to figure out how to have a stable, reliable platform, and how to make it the most useful platform for engineering at Google. And we also had a goal, like an OKR, G3 team is best team. This is a team where you can come and do your best work, and you can be really productive, and you can have an impact, and that will be recognized. And our team grew and grew. This is the best team. So you can see that we have Ruth and Michael, our senior level engineers, who came in and started really kicking ass and building out the platform. And we have new writers, and people are helping out. And the core thing is that this is my job, and Theodore and Aaron are 50%, but everybody else who is building this platform is doing it on 20% time as a volunteer. They're doing it because we all have the same goals and objectives, and we're driving towards it, and it's really great. So, what do we learn when we're doing this? These are the things we know are true. Really and truly, we think this is what we learned from this process. You have to focus on the engineer in the internal engineering space, where engineers are responsible for the docs. We had to take off our writing hat. We had to think about, we couldn't develop tools and expect engineers to adapt their workflow into ours. We had to look at their workflow and adapt it into theirs. Focus on the user. The writers, if it's a useful platform, the writers will follow. But again, focus on the engineer. Second thing, and this was related to the cookie licking, this strongly came out of cookie licking, was momentum matters. Do a small basic platform first. Have it rock solid, have it very reliable, and then add on features as they get good, and the user is delighted. We get a lot of really positive feedback every time we add on a new feature, but it was start small, iterate often, get it out there. The single biggest thing that we learned, and this is really fundamental to our perceived role as technical writers on the team, a lot of us had a ton of experience. Like Aaron was a very senior tech writer at IBM. I've been there for 20 years. There'd been, there's a lot of things, and it was like, we have all this expertise, and yet nobody is respecting my authority. Nobody is coming to me and saying, can you please help us fix our docs? Tell us what to do. And it dawned on us that after a while, that all our experience in the tech writing world, and all our experience in tech in general, and our knowledge of layout and CSS and content chunking and organization, it was exactly as relevant as my time working on Doctor Who. It was not relevant at all, because nobody was going to come and ask us to give them direction and things. But what we found is that when we did step up and focus on the engineer, we did develop authority and we did develop influence, and it is there for the taking if we do that. It was the best. So, quick happiness review on where we're at on all of these things. first one is optimism. Do you make a difference? It does make a difference. 1,600 projects are using it, but even more, there are thousands of change lists. There's hundreds being submitted every day where now engineers, they change the code and they update the docs in the same change list. That is crucial for maintaining docs. And that's the part of engineering culture. It is beginning to be part of the workflow and the integration. The perception of stress. I have to say, I actually do work more than I have worked ever, and I don't think that's a good role model. It's a marathon, not a sprint, but I'm also less stressed than I've ever been. It's like, I can't wait to get to work. I want a lovely, lovely work, you know, and it's not stressful because we have an environment and a team that's really motivated and self-directed and amazing people, and we can see that we're making a difference. And the third one is connection. And there's two types of connection, and the first is connection to the team. I mean, it really has been a satisfying experience to work with this team. G3Doc team is the best team. But the other one was connection to engineering in general and to the goals of Google. And this was really a change for us. And I want to tell a story that illustrates this. A little while ago, I was in New York visiting Erin. And there was something we wanted to do with G3Doc. We wanted to connect it to some other kinds of information. And Erin and I, two individual contributor tech writers, so pretty far down on the ladder, we called this meeting, and there were a bunch of very senior engineers there. And we were sitting there and discussing this feature, and one of the engineers said, you know, this is going to require a change to the whole way we do across the code base. And the other guy, the most senior guy in the room, leaned back and he said, well, you know, 3 of the 5 people in this room are global approvers of the database. I do not think that is going to be a problem. And then my phone bleeped, and I looked over, and Erin was sitting there very quietly. It's very hard to tell what Erin's thinking, but my phone blinked and I got a text message. And it was Erin. And it is. So the message, authority and influence, they're there, they're ours for the taking if we focus on the user and step up and solve the engineer's problem. That's, it really is, it's been the best year. If I could say anything, I would say, go 5 blades, be happy. Thank you.